Hi, my name is Mark J. Judge. So, exploration as a pillar in D&D 5e gets kind of dogged on. And I get why, but it makes me kind of sad. What makes me sad about it is the potential that I can see as a storyteller. There is so much drama to be found in your party roughing it through the woods, having to survive on the scraps of supplies that they can find, making tough navigation decisions and time management decisions. But it seems like in a lot of campaigns these days, where the exploration is less of the purpose and the storytelling and narrative is more the focus, it seems like this overland travel style of exploration just gets kind of tossed to the side, and it often feels sort of like boring filler. And obviously this is very disappointing. I mean, think about how many cool storytelling opportunities there are for exploration to be a really engaging part of your narrative for you and your players. But it makes sense that a lot of the time it gets kind of tossed aside because the mechanics that are given to you, though plentiful, aren't amazing, particularly in terms of overland travel. The truth is, though, is that it's very easy to run combat encounters and social encounters that are also filler. So I think the rap that we give exploration is a little bit unfair. So I want to look at what makes anything filler in D&D, and I want to take a look at what we can do to make the exploration pillar, particularly overland travel, more engaging from a storytelling and gameplay perspective. So first things first, Zipperon Disney. Awesome name. I never said it out loud, and I just realized how awesome of a name that is. Zipperon Disney has a video about exploration as a pillar and how to run sort of overland travel and random encounters and stuff, and I'm just going to link those videos down there because you should really check those out. They're very good, and I will be doubling down on some of the advice he gives in those. This video, though, is going to be a little bit more theoretical about, from a creative writing and storytelling perspective, what makes something filler and why exploration in this game runs into that problem so often. So, kind of the boiled down version of what Zipperon says is that anytime you are engaging the player's sense of discovery, you are technically engaging with the pillar of exploration as a dungeon master. Anytime the information is not just handed to them and they need to go looking for something. So this doesn't just have to be overland travel or navigating through a dungeon. This can also be finding out about rumors, searching for a particular person in a city, finding some sort of lost piece of lore, etc., etc. But with such a wide definition, why does exploration so often feel like boring filler to dungeon masters and players? Well, I think it is because the mechanics that are handed to us in the source books for 5e, it's a little more difficult to actually figure out how to fit those mechanics into an engaging story. We need to acknowledge that with social encounters and combat encounters, you also are only given numbers and information and roll tables, and then paragraphs explaining how to use them. We still expect dungeon masters to be bringing their own craft and weaving these pillars into the narrative in a satisfying way. You're not told, what will be a satisfying combat encounter or what's going to make the players like this NPC in the book. We just figure out how to do that over time and building up our skill. So, part of the reason exploration is a little bit more difficult than those two is because what is provided to us is a little less narratively engaging. There's this Reddit post called A Completely Raw Day of Exploration. Raw here being rules as written, of course, but I like saying raw because it's always in caps and it's funny to me. Basically, this person went through a day of travel, overland travel, just using the rules that were provided. Random encounters, rolling for navigation checks, applying exhaustion if the party traveled longer than they should, managing water and rations, etc., etc. It was an interesting read because I don't think many dungeon masters actually take the time to do all that stuff. And I think it's for good reason. As many of the comments on that Reddit post would agree with me, that stuff is just really boring and unengaging to do. Nothing is really happening, no real choices are being made, nothing's actually moving forward in this story. And that is why these things are a little hard to engage with. So what do we do about it? Well, the truth is, we already know with combat and social pillars what to excise and what to leave in. We've all been in that session where the party spends 3 hours shopping, and we roleplay every single shopping encounter, and we're like, alright, I'm never doing that again. That was a waste of social encounter. The story wasn't actually moving forward, talking to all of those shopkeepers. From now on, we're just gonna kinda hand wave that. We've also all been in a session before where you get to the third wave of goblins and you're like, ugh, come on. I just want to get to the story. We're here to get the crystal. Let's just go get the crystal. I'm tired of all these goblins. So we know that filler can happen in any of the pillars. I think when it comes to exploration, you need to excise a good deal of those mechanics and only use them sparingly to actually tell a satisfying story that doesn't get bogged down in roll tables and navigation checks and asking the players to do a lot of bookkeeping and random DCs that really nobody wants to be doing and are just standing in their way to feel like they're doing something because they're rolling dice. I think there are two questions you can ask yourself when you are trying to determine if something is going to actually be engaging or feel like. The first question is this where the meaningful story is happening? In this 7 days of overland travel between these two places, are we actually going to be engaging with what I want this story to be about and what these players want their characters to go through and grow from? Or are we just going to be picking berries, fighting random monsters? You get the gist. The second thing, are real choices being made? See, a big problem with the mechanics is that a lot of things happen to the players. You tell them to make a navigation check. You tell them if they keep going, they're going to take exhaustion. And a lot of these things aren't actual meaningful choices. Here's a piece of writing advice that actually applies very well here. In life, a choice is between any set of things, and often we can determine what is the best choice to make. In drama, a meaningful choice is between two things that would be good or two things that would be bad. See, now we actually have tension, because no matter what the party chooses to do, they're going to be missing out on something good because they took the other thing, or they're still going to be suffering in some way. They just need to determine which way is more beneficial to them and which will actually hurt less. As you can imagine, if you're watching a movie and this dramatic choice comes up for the protagonist where she needs to abandon her wife or stay with her wife. Well, if that's all the choice is, then it's pretty obvious what she's going to do. But if the choice is now abandon her wife or abandon her father, because there's something in the story that makes that a binary and she has to pick one over the other, well, now there's drama. And we're going to learn who that character is based on what choice they make and who they abandon. By the same token, if your players are traveling and the choice is go a few miles slower and not take levels of exhaustion that we need to spend an entire day sleeping off, or go a little bit faster and take exhaustion, well, unless there's something set up in the story to make them need to go faster, the choice is very obvious. What we run into a lot with random encounters and travel like this is there's a lot of dice rolling and there's a lot of choices being made, but the players aren't using their cool abilities, and they're not really using their backstory to engage with material in an interesting way, because there's no actual choices being made. And here is the main reason those two filler questions usually end up getting the wrong answer. The way we tend to use overland travel in this new style of D&D that a lot of us are playing that's very narrative focused is that we set up a story event in location A, and we give them clues that let them know that there will be another story event in location B. And then we run overland travel for 8 sessions of them getting from location A to location B. That's not where the story is, and that's not where meaningful choices are going to be made. And of course, to reiterate what I said at the beginning, this doesn't mean overland travel can't be fun. In fact, I'm running an entire campaign right now that is based on overland travel. What I am saying is that when the story is happening entirely based on big set-piece combat encounters, big cities and locations that the party goes to, and social encounters with prominent NPCs, throwing them in the woods for a week can be very uneventful for the story itself, no matter what is actually happening to them in terms of running out of food, getting attacked by monsters, etc., etc. If there's no world building, if there's no meaningful encounters happening with PCs or NPCs, then no matter what is going on is going to feel like filler, because we want to get to where the story is. So that was all sort of theoretical. Here are just some quick bullet point pieces of advice I can give you that are more practical to make sure that those 2 filler questions are actually getting the right answer. The story is meaningful this session, and moving forward, we're not just getting from point A to point B. And real choices are being made. Actual choices between 2 good things or 2 bad things that are going to be tough and are actually going to have impact later on. Number 1. This is pretty obvious, but I actually think some people overlook it. Have combat encounters stack up on the same day, or happen in the middle of the night so the party can't get a long rest. Pretty much no matter how hard your combat encounters actually are, if only one is happening a day, your party's going to be able to handle it. A big part of the fun of the game is when you've been through 2 or 3 combat encounters, and you are out of resources, and now you need to figure out how to get through this next one without your spells, your bombs, your potions, whatever. If you just use the random encounter tables, you're probably only going to end up having one, and it's going to be with random monsters that don't really tie into the story at all. But if you can find ways to stack it on, or have the party be pursued by creatures almost relentlessly, immediately there is more tension. 2, add some sort of element of ticking clock. Let's go back to our exploration example. If the party is choosing between moving safely or moving fast, and there's no element of time or urgency at play, the choice is obvious. But if you tell them, if you just take the road, this town is 5 days away, and you need to get there in 2 days, or else the king will die. Well, now we have a lot of choices to make. Do some of us stay awake and just plow through and take exhaustion, and then we just get there exhausted and have to deal with that? Are we going to find some sort of magical means of getting there? Some sort of teleportation, or maybe overland travel, like flying or something on a pack of griffins. There's so many opportunities that open up if you just add urgency and a ticking clock. 3, use random encounters as an opportunity to world build. I do random in air quotes because rather than rolling on a table, I typically like to come up with a list of encounters that could happen in this location that are tied into the world I've created, and then pick one whenever it seems like the right time for them to happen. So rather than just encountering a random pack of pterodactyls, maybe you have it built into your world what pterodactyls are and what they symbolize, and that maybe there's this tribe that uses pterodactyls as part of their sort of military and fighting force. Now when you have a random encounter with pterodactyls, it's actually an opportunity for the players to get a sense of your world and lore in a natural way without it getting dumped on them. Number 4, put your location B in an unknown place. So rather than moving from town A to town B, and we're just kind of waiting to get to where the story is over here, tell them that town B or cave B or whatever is actually in an unknown place. Now they need to quite literally explore to find out where that's going to be. Tell them maybe where the first clue is. There's this marking on an ancient oak tree 1 day south of here, and if you analyze it carefully and use this scroll, you'll be able to tell where the next piece is, and eventually you will get to the lost city of Alzabethoth, or I'm not good at fantasy names, that's my weakness. But you can see the point here. If you make the actual act of exploration part of the story to get to the second location, now the story is moving along with you while you're doing your overland travel. It's not just filler in the way in between the story beats. Number 5. This one might be a little more personal, take it or leave it, but I really don't like navigation checks. I think they just get in the way, and they're another example of something happening to the player, not them making a choice. So, I would only call for navigation when it is actually going to be a meaningful decision and move the story forward in some way. Example is the party comes to some sort of fork in the road, and they need to choose between taking the 1-day shortcut through the dangerous spider territory or the 3-day safe path through the trails. Now, if you have a ticking clock in place, now this becomes a real choice. And those are the only instances where I would really worry about navigation. Otherwise, unless they're in really uncharted territory or there's a dust storm going on or something like that, just trust that they know where to go. And then we only need to worry about navigation at the table when it's going to affect the drama and make a meaningful choice for the party. And finally, number 6. Maybe your overland travel is just going to be downtime between the story beats. You can still make this very engaging. And I think the way you can do this is to take advantage of the downtime to build character. I once ran a campaign where the party was on a boat for 4 entire sessions, getting from the town of Grey Spirit to the city of Lake of the Saints on the other end of the continent. Now, I wanted to make this choice for them to be on this boat for a long time because part of my continent of Lyaden as a world-building sort of thing was that no one traveled. It was just too dangerous. And I wanted to make sure that the party knew that what they were doing was historic, going across the continent to get from one location to another because they were trying to save the world from a global threat. What this meant, though, is I ran into the challenge of trying to make this month, both in-game and out-of-game, of being on this boat interesting. And it actually ended up being some of the most fun any of us had at the table. And it's because we used the opportunity of downtime to lean into the character building. The main story actually took a little bit of a back seat, and that ended up being a good thing because the party had a chance to breathe. And now, everybody that they were on the boat with, both the PCs and a couple of NPCs from my creation that were joining them, everybody had a chance to just sort of talk to each other and get to know who each other was. The bards would share stories with each other. Some of the rangers and more nature types would tell stories about the land and what used to happen here. And random NPCs they would come across would have stories to tell them or problems of their own. You know, they have romance drama going on with somebody or whatever. And none of this was going to affect what happened in Lake of the Saints, literally. But thematically, knowing who those characters were, spending an entire month getting to know them, made things way more heavy once we got to Lake of the Saints, and the plot started moving again, and character deaths started a-comin'. So, that's about it for me. Those are some quick little pieces of advice. Remember, is the story meaningfully moving forward right now, and are there meaningful choices being made? Pretty much no matter what pillar you're working with, if those two things aren't happening, it can start to feel like a slog. So, that's just some general advice about how to engage with overland travel and exploration to make it a little bit more engaging as the other pillars are in a lot of our games. Thank you for watching.